Welcome to Have You Read Any Good Books? I'm Mavis Applewater, and this is a very special author chat. I Owe It All to the Warrior Princess is part two of our ongoing salute to fan fiction. Joining us today are award-winning authors Karen D. Badger, Cheyne Curry, and the one and only KG Macgregor.
One and
Ladies,
only.
one and only. Well, I met your doppelganger once, and she was just a pain in the ass, I tell you. Uh, I met Karen, KD, and KG at BardCons.
Hmm.
Mm. And Shane, I met you at other things. But
UCLS, yeah.
yeah, but places like the Royal Academy of Bards, which I cannot say enough nice things. And now, as I say the Athenaeum, but Karen, you pronounce it.
I pronounce it Athenaeum.
Okay,
That's
that's which is
how
probably
I
right.
pronounce
Yeah, I'm from Massachusetts. We don't say anything right.
it.
Really gave a launching board for something. KG, my first introduction to you was, of course, Shaken.
Yeah, that was my first introduction to writing fanfic.
And one of my favorite lines is from Shaken, where she says, if that happens, I'll realize my worst fear because they've been in an earthquake and they're trapped in that mall. And what's that? Being buried alive? No, being caught dead in a bridal shop. I love that. It's all these years later. I still get a chuckle out of that.
I often, when I do readings, I often read that scene because it does get a few chuckles.
Well, I think the television show, well, quick, one by one. Shane, how did you discover the show?
I was really late to the party. I discovered it in like 2005, 2006. I can't remember which year. And everybody kept talking about, I had been doing Law and Order SVU stories and submitting them. And a friend of mine, the Raven, she said,
Oh.
you got to watch Xena and start doing that. Well, the first episode I ever watched of Xena was Fallen Angel, and I had no idea what was going on. So I really wasn't impressed other than, the way they looked. And then I started watching the show and I think late 2005, and the chemistry just jumped right off the screen at me. It's like, yeah, I got to write these two. And so that's how I ended up um, starting to do Uber and other stories.
And Karen?
So my story is a little bit more complicated. Actually, Xena is not only responsible for starting my writing, but responsible for me completely changing my life. I was married to a man for 20 years, not in a good situation, not a very good relationship. One day I was at home doing something in the kitchen, and my 15-year-old son at that time said, "Hey, Mom, come watch the TV with me. There's this woman kicking ass." So I went in, and it was Xena. Um, I immediately thought, oh my God. I was like attracted to her, didn't really understand it because I was not out yet. I knew I was different on the inside, but had no name for it. And I was 40 years old when I came out. So I did a little bit of research on the show itself, and found all of the fan fiction that was out there. And I was just floored. I was completely floored. And I decided I can do that. So I started writing the Billy Cat series. That is currently 10 books long.
I was
But
going to say, the Commitment
but
series is 10 books in. That's
yes,
amazing.
but that led to me divorcing the husband, and completely changing my lifestyle. I met my first wife, through fan fiction. It completely changed my life. Completely. Thank God for Xena.
And KG.
Well, I was a little late to the party. The show was probably, I guess it was in its third season when I discovered it. We had just my partner's company moved us to California, and we when we arrived, our house wasn't completed yet. We lived in the Residence Inn. There were only two channels on the TV, and one was the USA Network. And one afternoon, we fixed dinner. We turned on the TV, and the episode was Fins, Fims, and Gems. And we both stopped eating and watched. And when that episode was over, we both said, those two are sleeping together. And we just became hooked on Xena then. And when I started a new job, I started traveling a lot. And I was on a plane, I was in an airport, I was always waiting, lots of free time, lots of time in hotels. And I discovered fan fiction. And I guess it was about 2002 that I decided, after reading hundreds of stories, that I had an idea for how Xena and Gabrielle might meet in a future life. And I just sort of put that together in my head. And a friend of mine, I told the story to her, and she persuaded me to write it. And that was the Shaken story.
Nice.
That was it's an interesting story, because also became an ongoing series that they were taken from the first introduction. I don't want to do any spoilers because people should read this. And then into, what was it, five books?
There are 5 books. There were 3 for a long time, and then there were 4 for 12 years. And then I picked it up and wrote number 5 just a couple of years ago.
I think there was something about the whole community, though, of the fan fiction. I mean, I mentioned BardCon earlier, which was this get together of fan fiction enthusiasts, not just, people who penned it, but people who enjoyed it. And I discovered it because someone suggested you should, well, you like the show. She got me into the show. And I was like, well, okay. And I watched an episode where I basically did the same thing KG did. And her partner is like, oh, well, they are so sleeping together. And it was nice to see the dynamic that they were in love and they stood up for the right things, for justice, which we could use right about now.
Yeah.
And it inspired.
Oh, is something going on?
Yeah, I don't know.
I haven't been following.
I was really
news.
sad about a month ago.
I'm still sad.
I'm still sad, but I'm determined. Yeah, did something happen? There's a bumper sticker from my youth from 1972 that said, "Don't blame me, I'm from Massachusetts." And it had to do with Tricky Dick. I think I'm going to be repeating that in the future.
I've seen one that said, "Don't blame me, I voted for Xena."
There you go.
That bumper sticker was very popular back in 1999. I think a lot that went out in one of the fan kits or something.
Oh, yes. And the fan kits. And I think that the whole platform, I now have friends all over the world that are true friends. And I think it brought a lot of people together. I mean, I know Karen met her wife, Barb, which we're still waiting for just one look if she starts writing her half of it.
Yeah,
and I was there. I was there.
You're in the book.
Yeah. Val Brown and I are like, are you sure you guys don't know each other? Okay. They seem to really like each other.
Brenda and I met through fan fiction.
Yeah, Heather and I got 32 years, so we were already there. Next week, yeah, 32 years.
Wow. Anniversary.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I find it interesting how it brought everyone together, and the stories got us through some tough times, like 9/11 comes to mind. And the history. Ladies, do you feel inspired by all this? And it just gives you a jumping off point in the community in itself, in addition to the actual written words. Do you feel that early is a great place to be? anyone.
I'm not sure I understand your question. Could you
Do you
rephrase
feel
it?
that the community in itself is inspiring?
Oh my God. I would I would have stopped with Shaken were it not for the feedback that I got from the fanfic community and it was the adoration. It was very heady. I have to say, it went straight to my head. And I couldn't write the second story fast enough because I wanted to feel it again. And then again and again. And in the first 2 years that I was writing fanfic, I wrote 7 novel length stories, all of which were later cleaned up, heavily cleaned up, and published.
Mulligan, Malicious Pursuit are among them. House on Sandstone.
Mulligan, yep. Yes, House on Sandstone. Worth Every Step was a book that was based on the road from Kilimanjaro. There was a story called Getting It Right that was published as Just This Once. And several of my short stories ended up, I took those into novel length. There was Out of Love is based on a short story. Photographs of Claudia is based on a short story. And some of those were for the Valentine special at the Academy of Bards. But it
Cheyne,
was.
I'm going to cut you.
Sorry, I'll shut up. Go ahead.
No. I just want to make sure everyone gets.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Cheyne, you were going to say something. No, I'll get definitely.
I was just going to say that Road to Kilimanjaro was the very first Uber I ever read, and that's what got me started. So thank you.
Good, good. I'm very glad to hear that. A lot of people wrote to me and said that it inspired them to actually do the climb, and I mean that's fantastic.
Yeah, I wasn't that inspired.
Now you did a big climb though.
I did, yeah. and I kept a journal, and I used a lot of my journal notes in that story.
And Karen, you used your background in computers from one of yours back with the email was new, that they typed in the wrong address, and this is how the couple met, and they would corresponded back and forth.
Actually, I think you're talking about On a Wing and a Prayer.
On a Wing and a Prayer, that's it.
They met through email, but it wasn't accidental. One of them was a pilot, the other was a writer. And the pilot was on a layover and went to a bookstore and found the writer's book. And her email address was in there. So she contacted her through email. That was before we had cell phones. And I've had readers actually say to me, why is this story so old? They don't even have cell phones. Well, I wrote it back in 2000, where cell phones weren't a big deal back then. But yes, they met through email. It turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. And that one had heavy spots in it as well, but it was a good book. That was actually my bestseller out of all of my books, interestingly enough. And that one started out as an Uber because the characters very much look like Xena and Gabrielle, very much.
Yeah, we've all had to take that when we chose to get published, take that next step. And it was a learning curve. I remember KG, you also talked about that in a keynote speech about like editor looking at you and saying, okay, you can stop beating the horse. But I remember the older stuff looking back, because I remember when I finally brought one of my best known ones in the original version, they were doing a lot of faxing. Nobody was texting, in the old days, now, Cheyne, you have a new book out, Permission to Recover.
I do.
Which I'm in the middle of reading.
Well, thank you for that.
I'm enjoying it.
Book. Awesome book.
Thank you. It's based on, the characters aren't based on anybody real, but the story, the murder mystery isn't real, but all the stuff about basic training and MP school is very real. Mm-hmm. And I had when I had it online first, I had one person write to me and say, why is there so much swearing? It's like, have you ever been near the military? it's like a second language. So
The
if I
reason
wrote
they
it without,
say,
if I wrote it without the swearing, it wouldn't look
uh-huh,
authentic.
there's a reason they say swears like a sailor.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, that
But
brings up an
it's
interesting
responsible.
point. Do you, I'll go around again. I feel that fan fiction gave us a palette to go beyond just doing romance.
Hmm.
Yeah, KG, Malicious Pursuit. But yeah, I mean, you're known for romance like Mulligan and House on Sandstone, but things like Malicious Pursuit, you got to, and there was another Secrets So Deep. I got that right.
Yep,
Yeah,
somewhat.
getting into a little
There's a
quirk.
romantic element to all of my books.
Hmm.
But the romance arc itself is not forward, as you might say, in the books that you mentioned and in the last three in the Shaken series. Because when you write a series, you're not following the romantic arc. The arc is
Hmm.
they meet, they fall in love, they overcome obstacles, and they live happily ever after. But when you're writing a series, you have to have another story because they can't keep breaking up and getting back together and breaking up and getting back together. And the reason I say that the last three of the series were not romances. The second one actually was. Aftershock was a very tough book for a lot of people because um,
Oh, yeah,
the characters were together at the end of at the first Shaken story, and then I broke them up in Aftershock and got them back together. That followed the romantic arc.
it was
So
very
that was a romance.
powerful how you broke them. I'm not gonna do a spoiler, but that was like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people have told me that when they reread the series, they just don't read that book. That it just bothered them a lot. And I understand. I understand it's not what romance readers are always looking for. Uh, they don't always want the sadness and the grit. They're
Hmm.
looking for something else in their for their leisure time. I get it.
Yeah. And Karen, you also to into one of my favorite subjects, paranormal.
Oh, yeah.
So if we got romance, one of my favorite books, but it's won an award. House on Roof. Uh, what's the address? 1049. I have to have the book.
Oh, 1140 Rue
You know,
Royale.
right,
Yes.
which were inspired when a visit to New Orleans.
Yes.
You were drawn to the house.
I was. We went on a ghost tour, and that was one of the stops. Now, you couldn't go inside, but you could walk by it. And we stopped in front of the building, and I put my hands on the bricks, and I just felt this surge of something go through me. And I got covered in goosebumps. And right now, as we are speaking, I have goosebumps. Every time I talk about this book, I get goosebumps. And has anyone seen the American Horror Stories on TV?
Saw the first season.
They
Yeah,
did a
sure, a little bit.
season where Kathy Bates played Delphine Lalare. She was a rich socialite in New Orleans. She happened to live in that house. Now, this is a true story. She lived in that house with her husband, who was a surgeon, and it was back during the time of slavery. And they had a third story on their home where they would lock the slaves and vivisect them, basically. They did all kinds of medical experiments on them, and some of them horrendous. Um, and that was one of the ways that they used to punish their slaves. So that house is real. That story is real.
Hmm.
And when I did the research after I felt that surge of energy pass through me, I went home and did the research. And what I discovered about that house was just insanely horrendous. So I decided to put a interracial couple in that house. They bought that house. And the woman of color part of the couple ends up having a connection to the ghost slaves that haunt the house. Now, that house is reported to be the most haunted house in New Orleans. Um, I did a ton of research on it, went to Chamber of Commerce. Um, I even found the blueprints of the house, which are in the book. But that book was the first one that I had won a Goldie for paranormal type writing. So yeah, and it turns out that I've got 10 standalone books now, and then the 10 book Billy Cat series, and 8 of those 10 books, standalone books, are all paranormal and speculative. So
Oh,
that is my niche. So
yeah.
yes,
There's always a little romance going too, sometimes.
always, as KG said, there's romance in
It's
every
in
one of my
everything.
books.
Yeah. And Cheyne, you were so inspired. You had well, one, my favorite is Renegade. Freaking love Renegade.
Thank you.
Um, but you had a military background, you were a private investigator, you've had this crazy life, you.
I have,
Yeah.
and I've enjoyed every second of it. So, but I can't write romance. I really envy people that can just write a nice romantic novel. Mine has to have grit and murder and all kinds of this other stuff thrown in. And I wish I could just write a nice romance and keep everything else out but the love story. But as they have said that even the books that I write, they always have some kind of romance in them, except for the end and the resistance. There's really no
Yes.
romance because it's the apocalypse, not a lot of time to find love.
Which we're still waiting for the third one of you
Yeah, me
and
too.
Roselle Rasky
Me
get
too.
together and do that. But I feel that, and I just jump in and say that the platform we were given and we got the great feedback and encouragement allowed us to venture off in non-traditional, because it used to be, yeah, you could have a romance or you could have this, you can't have both. Do you ladies feel that fan fiction and being able to do that and posting online and has allowed you to expand your art,
Oh, yes.
taking it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, that's what got me started writing, and I haven't stopped.
If
I
you're
was
writing and posting online, there is an audience for absolutely everything you could write.
Yes, there is.
It's more difficult if you're publishing because it's very difficult to find a niche audience,
Mhm.
but you can find them online, or they'll find what they're looking for, just with alerts or word of mouth. The company they keep. I'm really looking for a story about a left-handed blue-haired astronaut. Then, oh, I just read that.
Oh, check out this site. And people are really great at archiving it too and keeping control. It's just amazing. I feel that it is a very inclusive community and a very care. I know the Xena is. I haven't really ventured into. I didn't write any X Files or any Law and Orders. I never went to the ER genre or Star Trek. I mean, I found Xena and I kind of hung with that. And when I first found it, I found authors like, well, KG, but Junebug and Missy Good, of course. And
Mhm.
you just get sucked in and you wait for that update. And there better be an update soon, And when I started writing, I found out that the feedback was just so encouraging and so inspiring. It's one thing with my
You
wife.
are you are a machine, Mavis. You are an absolute machine with your Wednesday afternoon series. I mean, how many of those did you write? 100?
I don't know. I did one every Wednesday. Now, granted, the latter ones were for about 2.5 years. So that's a lot, except for the Wednesday after 9/11, which was the Tuesday,
Yeah.
because that's just rude, you know. But yeah, and I am now revisiting some of those though and expanding. Like East Lake Road, I'm running on Vela, which has given me the fanfic posting feel.
Yeah.
Mm.
I get
And
the urge every now and then um, to write my kind of fantasy for how Xena comes back to life after they chopped her head off. Well, I'm sorry if you're watching the series, don't
oh,
watch Xena's
spoiler
head.
alert.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, I read a lot of post-fin stories
Mhm.
that were interesting, but I had kind of my own way of imagining how it would happen. And I'm just so tempted to write it down, but I have so many different works in progress right now that I dare not start another.
Right.
Mhm.
I think, we're all tempted to fix that. A lot of people said they got into fanfic because they wanted to fix that. I was surprised. I was talking to Susan X. Maher that she hadn't written before she started doing fanfic. And
Yeah,
if
I
anyone
didn't either.
I didn't either.
really,
Me either.
Yeah.
oh, okay,
Fanfic started me.
so it was just me. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, I almost signed with Naiad and all that. I get the call from Barbara.
Must have
Nice.
been fun.
It was fun and terrifying.
Yes. I think she had that effect on a lot of people.
And that woman sighed a lot. But yeah, I found it very. I think fanfic gave me the shot. It was like I often say that if I hadn't discovered that, like the Academy of Bards and all that, I would still be wondering, can I do this? Can I write it? It gave me a voice, and it gave so many people a voice. I feel the three of you come to mind,
Yeah.
and the four
Completely
ladies I
changed my
talked to.
life.
It did.
Yeah.
The warrior. I owe it all to the warrior princess. I have to say.
Mhm.
I'm gonna move so people can see your books. I want to remind people because we're running a little short. To click like and subscribe and check out the gift shop. But everything about these ladies, to way to find their work, is listed in the links below. I know KG Macgregor, Bella Books, Karen Badger. You are with Badger Bliss and Bossy Pants Publishing Books. It's it books is
Yes.
Cheyne Curry, and I'd like to thank Shane for stepping in at the last minute for me.
Oh, well, thanks for asking.
My pleasure. And I wanted to talk about Permission to Recover because it's I'm reading that. I'm reading Renee Bess's new one, Her Last Secret, which is given what's going on in the world today is very poignant.
Mhm.
It's a
Yeah.
definite must read. But I feel that so many ways. I want to thank the three of you for one doing this because let's get up early on a Sunday and go talk to Mavis. But to talk about fan fiction, I think that the cons and we're just keeping an eye on time. The cons and the platforms and everything. I think it created a very safe community in so many ways. I mean, there's always going to be that one person. Anyone agree, disagree, want to comment any about the good old days?
I think the cons for me kind of created a family I really wanted to see. Like every year you'd go to a family reunion, but it was people that you enjoyed being around
Yes.
instead of an actual family reunion where there's, like bickering and judgment and picky and I think the one thing that really surprised me the first couple of cons I went to was, and yes, there are definitely exceptions, but was how much all the authors seemed to really support and like each other. I mean,
Yes.
there just
Mhm.
didn't seem to me to be a lot of pettiness and competition and I was really impressed by that. That really provoked me into wanting to be a part of that community.
One of the primary reasons Barb and I even go to the cons is to see all of our friends. We get to
Right?
see them at the con and some of them at P-Town during Women's Week, but that's it. So
Yep.
we don't like missing them because we just love everybody so much. We look forward to seeing all of our friends. Definitely.
Yeah, and it struck me that when when we first started, it was like, oh, there's Karen. I know Karen. There's
Mhm.
Shane. I know Shane. Mavis. I know Mavis. we've known each other for years.
Years.
And we met, I couldn't tell you when we first met, but we're going on 20 years now, easily.
Easy.
All of us. And that's a history. That's a chunk of your life.
Yeah.
To be part of this community. I think what struck me about the fan fiction community is that it was so supportive and so rewarding for the writers that it when people started buying books, it wasn't because they wanted books. You ask them over and over again, they would say to support the writers.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, we were making, if we were lucky, we were making $10 a book, but you support me with sending me your $10, and I mean, I honor you for that. All the writers, all the readers who did that, I just appreciate it so much. You gave me the inspiration to keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep trying to get better. And, here we are 20 some years later.
So many years later, but.
And looking back on, I've had a career. You gave me a career. So thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I'm going to take some more time.
Go for it.
I really thank people like Missy Good. I thank people like Advocate T. Novan, who put their stories out there and got the excitement of everyone and got everyone paying attention and wanting to be a part of it, whether it was to write, whether it was to review, whether it was to build a website, whether it was to do fan art. Those people, you have no idea what an impact you had on other people like me. And a special shout out to Friction, their author, who goes by the name Friction, because she wrote a story. I'm going to call it Somewhere in Time, that started as a Xena and Gabrielle story, which was the only thing I was reading. I was not reading Uber at all. But then they jumped through time to present day. And I thought, well, now this is cool. And so that's the one thing that inspired me the most to start thinking about where would Gabrielle and Xena meet in a future life. And that's how it manifested for me to end up writing that story, my story.
Okay. And I hate to cut you off, but I don't want to be cut off again.
I don't have to talk anymore.
I want to thank everyone for joining me, and tune in. And Missy Good will be a future guest, actually. So thank you for bringing her up. Thank you again, ladies. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Mavis.
Thank you. Bye.